was broken. Then the presence of God started to hover around the town.
The entire atmosphere changed. Where once people used to be afraid to go out at night, Kiambu now enjoys one of the lowest crime rates in the country. Local bars have been closed and remodeled into churches.
The town has flourished. We have seen actual change. And with the presence of God, of course, there comes a lot of changes. Favors, prosperity. That's what we are seeing today.
Now that Kiambu has a good name, people from Nairobi are flocking to get houses there. The population is up by 30%. There has also been a dramatic increase in the number of conversions. The Kiambu Prayer Cave, otherwise known as the Word of Faith Church, has expanded to more than 5,000 members. Not bad in the town where congregations previously averaged only 30 to 40 people.
We are seeing God do great things in this town. We are seeing lives changed. Criminals coming to Jesus, prostitutes, robbers, all kinds of people coming to Jesus.
As Thomas is quick to point out, the recipe for continued success must also include prayer.
Prayer is communicating with God. It's that simple. It's talking to God, who has the power to change situations. Now, there is so much prayer in this place that helps us. That way it helps us to not only maintain what we gave, but also to gain more ground.
Each day, more than 400 intercessors gather to pray. The routine begins at 6 a.m. They call it their morning glory. This is supplemented by Friday night prayer vigils and Wednesday evening gatherings called Operation Prayer Storm.
Prayer generates a power that is extraordinary. It's a power that transforms. I've seen it transform the city. If God can do it in Kiambu, He can do it anywhere in the world.
This town was in serious trouble.
Lots of Satanism, witchcraft. We had the Moonies in the valley, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, TM, Transcendental Meditation Facilities, and Church of Scientology. We discovered that we were methamphetamine manufacturing capital of the West Coast.
There was a spirit of competition that reigned and ruled within not just the churches, but at the head of those churches within the pastors.
For years, this sleepy retirement community near the San Jacinto Mountains was known as a pastor's graveyard. People came to the valley to live out a life of ease, and they wanted to be left alone. But underneath this laid-back lifestyle, there lurked a dark side.
The community's problems had an underlying spiritual basis to them, and the valley was very seated in cult and occultic activity.
Cults weren't the only problem. Neighborhood youth gangs had plagued the Hemet suburb of San Jacinto for decades. Pastor Gordon Houston's San Jacinto Assembly of God Church sits on the very street that's home to the town's notorious First Street Gang.
There are kids whose dads and grandfathers were a part of the First Street Gang. And so this is something that has perpetuated itself throughout the generations, literally.
The danger was so great around the First Street area, the police refused to go there without substantial backup.
We got a phone call in the middle of the night. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Gordon experienced firsthand the gang's destructive nature when his church was vandalized one night.
Broken out. And at the base on the inside, there was this large pool of blood. I mean, it was massive. And that is when the police told us who it was that had broken this window. It was one of the family members of the home right across the street, who was the central part of the gang structure here in San Jacinto.
It turns out the Hemet Valley was also a major drug center. At least 9 methamphetamine labs operated out of the area, each benefiting from the dry climate, remote location, and friendly law enforcement.
I've actually had law enforcement officers transport methamphetamine for me in their police cars.
Sonny often cooked up enough meth in a given month to supply more than 1 million people. Much of the deadly powder was trucked out of town disguised as forms of sheetrock. Hemet's spiritual turnaround did not come easily. Neither the Becketts nor the Houstons were early Valley enthusiasts.
And I never really wanted to be there. I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere, 18 miles from the closest freeway in a valley. My wife and I, Susan and I, had our emotional bags packed all the time, waiting for the day that God would somehow call us out of this valley.
The Houstons didn't even unpack their bags when they arrived in town.
We had our little baby, 6-month-old baby, in a Pinto runabout with no air conditioning and vinyl seats. And we drove down the street, we looked at the church and said, no thank you.
God began to speak to my wife and I, speak to me one day and said, would you spend the rest of your life in this valley for me? And God couldn't have asked a worse question of me. Would I spend the rest of my life in a valley I didn't love, I didn't care for, I didn't want to be a part of?
And God said, no, I've got a plan. I have got a plan if you will make a commitment to this place.
The Becketts silenced the voices urging them to leave Hemet by purchasing a cemetery plot on the edge of town.
And I said, unless Jesus comes back, this is my land. I'm starting. My commitment is right here.
Filled with a new passion for his community, Beckett joined several men for a night of prayer and fasting in a nearby mountain cabin. It proved to be a powerful experience.
We knew we had touched something in the realm of the Spirit that would be very significant for our valley. It was at that point things began to escalate spiritually.
Researchers started to feed intercessors fresh information on the problems plaguing the community.
The intercessors in our church have been able to use spiritual mapping to help them focus on issues. If you don't know where the problem is, you can't evaluate it.
Spiritual mapping brings us to a place of knowledge and information. If I have a base of issues that I know are strongholds within my city, then God has the ability to speak something into my heart to say, gather the intercessors and go after this now.